So we are locked and loaded and ready to start exploring. So yes, again, greetings. Thank you for coming. This is going to be a pretty wild ride. We have a lot to cover. The expected runtime was originally 45 minutes. We're going to try to keep it as close to that as possible, but it is very unlikely that we're going to be able to keep it to 45 minutes. But we'll let everybody know at that time. And if you want to stick around, please do. But if you have other obligations, then we totally understand. This is going to be recorded and you'll have access to see anything that you miss. So again, this is our 5th workshop, completely dedicated to Gravity Forms OpenAI. This workshop, we're going to teach you, first of all, how to use our free Gravity Forms OpenAI plugin. And as part of that process, we're going to teach you how to accomplish practical, real-world examples with the plugin. As I mentioned, we did share a link in the chat to this companion doc that I'll be actually going through myself as part of this workshop, and you can also follow along. We find it can be useful to just kind of help you focus in on what we're doing, and also just a great reference document to come back if there was something that you were particularly interested in and want to explore further. And again, lastly, I just want to reiterate, this will be recorded. So if you have to leave for any reason, don't worry about it. You can come back and watch it in next week's weekly newsletter. So what are we going to actually be covering today? So we're going to do sentiment analysis with Gravity Forms entries to kind of get the vibe of that entry, the emotional energy of in our case, it's going to be support customers. Next, we're going to explore moderating Gravity Forms entry content to see if it passes OpenAPI's content policy. And we'll talk more about what that is and what that looks like in a second. Then we're also going to do live results from OpenAPI or OpenAI. So what this is just talking about, instead of having to submit the form to get responses from OpenAI, you can populate anything's live merge tags to see the responses live on the live on the form. And then we're going to jump over and do a fine tuning for dummies, very advanced dummies for sure. I think you're going to enjoy that. That's actually going to be led by our CTO, Clay Griffiths. And then lastly, or not lastly, but as far as segments, we're going to be doing hosted segments. We're going to be doing marketing and AI, a crash course by our marketing wizard, Cole Fraser. And then lastly, we're going to end it with some Q&A. You guys submitted a ton of really good questions. So you'll definitely want to stick around for that. All right. Without further ado, let's start exploring sentiment analysis. So what is sentiment analysis again? Let's just paint a scenario here. You have a support form. You want to identify the sentiment of each support request. And why do you want to do that? So two really obvious examples of this are triaging negative tickets and identifying serious issues more quickly. Let's say you released a new version and you're seeing a bunch of just really angry tickets coming in. That would just be a kind of indicator to you like, hey, this is creating a lot of drama for us. We need to address this very quickly. It's also just on a daily basis, being able to kind of tag tickets with the emotional assessment of that ticket, of the sentiment, will give your support staff a kind of like a heads up, like, hey, this person is probably feeling a little negative. I might, consider being a little extra patient on this one. The other one is the long-term view of sentiment. And this is where you're identifying trends and trying to correlate those trends with other factors. So for example, if you're seeing a lot of first-time users, their first tickets are generally very negative in sentiment, that might be an indicator that you need to invest more in documentation, or your onboarding flow is just not great. And so just understanding that they're writing to you and they're frustrated that they're writing to you, not just that they're writing to you, can be an indicator that they're not just trying to do more with the plugin, but they're actually frustrated with what you're already offering. Another example is specific plugins creating, negative support experiences. Like, are there specific plugins in your queue that people are just having a bad experience with? Being able to see the sentiment on that is useful. And then, inversely of that is, what kinds of requests are you getting that are the most positive? And how can you look for opportunities to, what are you doing right that's creating very positive support interactions? And how can you create more of those? So this is just a few examples. Next, we're going to go ahead and jump in and start exploring in the actual code. Well, the code running in the UI. So over here, we have our support form. I've kind of narrowed this down to a single field, and this is going to be our issue description. And then we have our sentiment field, which is a hidden field, and this is going to be used to capture the actual sentiment. So now jumping over to OpenAI, you can see we have an OpenAI feed here, and this is all powered with our OpenAI plugin. So jumping into the feed, I've given it a name just to kind of describe its role. It's a sentiment analysis. We're using the completions endpoint. The completions endpoint is essentially this idea that you give it a prompt, and then the AI returns a completion of that prompt, or its best, completion of what it thinks you want. The other options here are edits and moderations. Edits would be like if you wanted to change the grammar. I explored this a little bit today with trying to get text to apply to the AP style book, and it was pretty awesome. And I wish I could actually demo that for you today too, but we just don't have enough time. And then we'll also cover the moderations here in a little bit. But for now, again, we're just doing completions. We're going to give it a prompt, and it's going to try to give us its best response to that prompt. The OpenAI model here, we have a variety of models. I'm not going to go over all of these. They are documented in our documentation. As a general rule, I typically just end up using DaVinci because it's the best and it's pretty quick. But there are some edge cases where some of these other scenarios might be more applicable to your specific use case. So my prompt here, it says basically decide whether this support request sentiment is positive, neutral, or negative. And then I include the merge tag via the merge tag selected here for our issue description field. So whatever the user types in that field is going to be replaced here and then sent off to OpenAI's API. That is such a mouthful. I always say OpenAPI, even though it's OpenAI API. I'm not going to go over the merge tags just yet, but in this case, we actually want to capture that sentiment in a field. And so the way we're going to do that in this case, since we don't need to know this before the user submits the form, we're going to map it to a field using the map result to field option in the feed. And then there's a bunch of other options down here. Again, this is stuff that you're typically safe to use the defaults. And as you explore and get more familiar with OpenAI, I think that you'll find that you'll want to explore this more. But again, for the sake of time, we're just going to skip over all that. So we have everything set up now. We're going to go ahead and preview the form. And down here, I actually have some example submissions that we can just copy and paste in here to get some sentiments. So I updated the latest version today, and it's giving me a fatal error. Please fix now. So it's pretty clear to a human that this person is not happy. So let's go to our entries after we've submitted that. And you can see, yeah, that's a negative sentiment. Makes sense. Let's go ahead and submit another one. We've copied our neutral one. Hey, wizards, I updated the latest version today, and it's giving me a fatal error. So still a fatal error. I downgraded, so all is well, but I'd love to get back on the latest as soon as you fix this issue. Okay, so obviously they're still encountering an issue, and it's not a great issue. But the overall sentiment of the message was, they're okay. They're not super upset. They're not going to start leaving bad reviews all over the internet. You probably have a little time with this customer. Let's submit one more. Hey, wizards, I updated the latest version today, and I'm loving the new feature. Could you help me get it to do this other thing too? So as hard as I tried, I could not get it to give me a positive response if it included the word fatal error, which I think is fair. So I had to change the context of the sample text here a little bit to get a positive one. So you can see this one's just talking about they like a new feature, but they do want support to try to do something a little bit extra. And when we submit this, we'll go and we'll see that we got that positive rating. So just imagine this, but now imagine that you have, thousands of these. So you'll be able to extrapolate a lot more information from that and again, try to start discerning those trends that you're seeing. Also, you could collect, in our support form, we collect which perk that they're using. And really cool ideas here is you can actually even try to extrapolate the perk that they're using from the text. Like they might even mention populate anything. And you could get OpenAI to give you its best guess on which perk that they're talking about. One thing that you could do to also take this further, and I mentioned this at the beginning, is when these, I don't have it set up to go to Help Scout here, but if you're using Gravity Forms Help Scout add-on, you could set it up so that this sentiment is used as an actual tag in Help Scout. So then you could get all of this data in Help Scout. Again, that would let your support engineers or people know kind of like what the AI had said the sentiment was. So I'm trying to give them that, just kind of clue them in, like, hey, this might be negative, or this might be neutral, this might be positive. And then on top of that, with Help Scout, for example, that's what we use for support. You can essentially do reporting based on those tags. So you'll be able to get a ton of information through that just by including that tag on the tickets. And you can see, again, like maybe people are writing more negative tickets at a certain time of day, for example. So all sorts of data to be derived here. Cool. Now, before we move on, is there any questions about sentiment analysis? Okay. Then let's jump into moderation. So, moderation. Whoops. I wasn't supposed to be there, y'all. So, again, another example. You're hosting a directory of tutors in training. Tutors have the option to receive anonymous feedback privately submitted through a Gravity form. But you want to make sure that these young tutors aren't receiving any inappropriate content. So OpenAI has an endpoint called the moderation endpoint that allows you to essentially intercept or flag content that doesn't comply with their usage policies, which I think you'll find are generally kind of in line with most people's usage policies. You got different categories here: hate and threatening, self-harm, sexual minors, violence, graphic. So all of these things will be blocked, and they'll actually give you a score for how much it thinks it falls into that category. So with that said, let's take a closer look at an actual real-world example of this. So go back to our thing here. We have our moderation form set up. On this one, we have, again, simplified it down to a single field. It's our feedback field where they're going to give feedback to the tutor. And then jumping over to OpenAI, we're going to go in to the OpenAI feed here. This one is the moderations feed. I'm using, again, the moderations endpoint. This one only has 2 different models to choose from. We're going to use the stable just to play it safe. The latest is probably safe to use as well. I have not explored it in depth. On this one, we're going to actually run all content through. In this case, it's still only one field, but I just wanted to expose you to that idea that on a form with multiple fields, you can send the all fields or check through, and it will include all of the form data. And then under behavior here, there's a couple options. You can do nothing and just log the rating. So that's going to be useful if you're just trying to just get a sense of how it works and what OpenAI would assess a given entry as. And I'll show you where that is in the entry notes in a second. Then you can also mark the entry as spam. That's what we're going to do here, is because we want to say, hey, we just don't want them to see this at all if OpenAI thinks it's inappropriate. And then the last one is you can actually prevent them from submitting the form by showing a validation error. I didn't change any of the other settings on this one. And with that said, let's explore. So on this one, oh, actually, I wanted to do one more thing before we jump into that. Sorry. So we have a plugin called Gravity Forms Spam Notification. And we actually use this on gravitywiz.com because we use Akismet for our spam protection. And every once in a while, Akismet will just give us a false positive on spam. And so, and we obviously take that very seriously. We don't want any customer reply or submission to go to spam. And so I look at everything that gets marked as spam, so that way I can just make sure that that no false positives get through. And so this will actually just add a notification event to the notifications. So you can send a notification to anyone, in my case, to the administrator, to let us know when an entry was marked as spam. And this gives us an opportunity to review it. Akismet is super good at learning from your mistakes. I'm sure that they are using some AI on their end. It is not OpenAI, I don't think, but it's still a useful tool. So I just wanted to show you that notification really quick that I'm set up over here. So again, I'm using this, the plugin's already installed, and I'm using this entry marked as spam event here. In the email, we're just using the admin email. So it goes to me on my installation here. And then the subject, I just put entry flag for moderation, and then I included the entry ID merge tag. And then in the content, we just put all of the content from the forms just so I can see a little bit about the entry when I get that notification. And then I also included a link to view the entry as well. So that way I could just very quickly go in, especially in the case where it is a false positive, and I can mark it as not spam. Okay, now we're ready to explore. So we're going to submit some inappropriate content. So I just know for a fact that if I say, I want to hurt you, and submit, first of all, you're going to notice that anytime Gravity Forms has an entry that's marked as spam, it gives you the default default confirmation. So even though we have a different confirmation configured, we're going to see this by default. That's why I know that it was marked as spam. And we're going to go and view the entries here. And I see we have no entries, but if you look at the spam, we have one. And there's our entry right there. So now let's see what we got in our notifications. Oh, there's one right there. Entry flag for moderation, 3301. It tells us the content of that, so we could verify, yeah, that is, but let's just imagine for whatever reason that this wasn't spam. Then we could just click right here and go not spam, and it would unspam it, and we'd be good to go. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier, where we have a note here that tells you all of the category scores. So in this case, it says, hey, this was flagged, and it was flagged for being, for violence. And then it tells you the scores of them. So if we look at the violence one, it's pretty high here, up at 0.9. Whereas you'll notice all the other ones are pretty low. I don't think anything's even over a 1/10 of a point. Yeah. And so violence, though, is almost at a full point, which I believe is the highest score that it can get, is a 1. Yeah. So anyways, you can explore there and see how different types of content that you submit will get different scores, different ratings. We do have some kind of loose ideas of being able to extrapolate this out into entry meta. That way you can kind of get a better sense and create more actionable items based on this data. But for right now, it's logged in the node so that you can at least see it. And we'd love to know what you would want to do with this, if that's something you even want to do anything with. All right. I think that's it on moderations. Any questions? Okay. In that case, I'm going to move on to live results. So live results, the why. Let's just say you have a book club, and each month members submit their review of the club's current book selection. You want to take some of the drudge work out of the review process, or at least the review submission process, by auto-generating a summary or an excerpt of the review. You also want to make sure that they can edit that generated content before they submit. Again, just giving that autonomy to them they're not forced to use the AI generated content, but it could serve as like a very useful starting point for them. So let's explore that scenario. Oops, it's like I lost my starter page. So we'll go workshop 5, and we'll go to our book review. So on this form, we have a post title field because we're going to be generating an actual post from this. We have a post body field, and then we have a post excerpt field. And this is the field that's going to be auto-generated by AI. And then we encourage the user to edit as desired below. So now let's go to our OpenAI feed. And we'll see here that we've called this the summarizer. And we are using the completions endpoint again on this one. The same model that we used on the first demonstration, the Text DaVinci 3. And then we give it a prompt. Summarize the following in a single sentence. That's the goal. And then we're going to give it the post body content where they're going to have submitted their review of the book. Next, we're going to enable merge tags. And this is going to give us something like this. And this is the live merge tag. This is what integrates with Populate Anything. And I included a link for it here, so you can go and explore that a little bit more. But live merge tags, the long and short of it is that it allows you to fetch data dynamically and display it pretty much anywhere in your form. And I'm going to show you how to configure this in just a second. But for now, we copied it, we have it, and I think that's it on this one. I don't think I made any other configuration changes. Yep, looks good. Okay, so now that we have that, though, we're going to go back to the form. We're going to go down to our post excerpt field. I'm going to go all the way down to the advanced tab. And in the default value, we're going to say, hey, we want to populate the default value of this field with that merge type that we copied. So I'm going to actually paste it again so you can see it. And then we're saying, okay, so where this says field ID here. So we're saying, hey, whenever this field ID updates, we want to update this default value with the feed that we just configured here. So whatever AI response it gives, we want to populate that value wherever we're using this merge tag. And whenever we want that to happen, whenever a given field is triggered. So we know that we're waiting for the user to input content into the post body. We can see right here, the field ID is 3. So we're going to go to post excerpt there. We're going to update field ID to 3. And that's it. That's the magic. So we're going to save the form. And now we're going to preview the form. And I'm going to put in some content here. The Hobbit, one of my favorite books. Throw a hand up in chat if you love The Hobbit. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy this random review I found on Goodreads. Just to kind of give you a sense of it. It says, some books are almost, actually, I just realized that's not going to be practical at all. It's a good review. He liked the book. And you can see here, this is the summary of it. So he says, although it can be challenging to review a book, especially one that is seen to be great, The Hobbit is a charming and enjoyable adventure story that resonates and that fascinates more than just being a simple entertainment. With its subtle humor and the lessons about all of our too human, and then it gets cut off. That's because we had a requirement here, and I actually meant to cover that, where we actually said on the general tab, we said, hey, we want to make sure this is no longer than 280 characters. Maybe we're going to use this excerpt in social media in addition to just the excerpt on the post. So it gets cut off. So this is a situation where it would actually require some sort of human interaction. But if we refresh this and try again, well, they gave us the same one. That's okay. So in this case, we can just finish it up. So, okay, with a subtle humor and lessons, but are all too human. We'll say, boom. So we're done. We're under the character max. So this is actually a great example of the interaction that you can get between AI and human editing, where we have a constraint and we want to make sure it honors that constraint. But we also got such a huge jump start on this, and we might be super happy with it now. So then we go ahead and submit this review, the summary. And it says your review has been submitted. You can make additional edits here. I set this up to link us to the edit view. So you could just see, this is again powered through just basic Gravity Forms post fields, where it does populate the excerpt right there. And you can see all the other content has been populated into the post. Okay. Any questions about getting live results from OpenAI? Okay. In that case, I am going to hand it off to Play.
Get that screen shared. All right. All right. Hey, everyone. Like David said, I'm the CTO at Gravity Wiz. You might see me around in support sometimes as well. But it's time to go over fine-tuning with OpenAI. This is thrown around quite a bit, almost excessively in some cases, but it is truly a powerful tool to create what are called fine-tuned models. So I'll just go through some of the overview for now. Whoops. Essentially, whoops. Geez, need to learn how to use Notion. So fine-tuning, you provide training data that contains a list of prompt and completion pairs. So the prompt is what you would type in or configure in the completion's feed settings, and then the completion is what you deem to be an acceptable response, or maybe even the best response. Some of the benefits of fine-tuning include higher quality results than prompt design alone. So you saw a lot in David's examples where he was using prompt design, meaning, hey, do this, or as someone said in chat, explain this like I'm 5. a variety of things. I've also seen people take the prompt design to the next level and just dump a ton of information about it, about something that they want to get answers for. So say like insurance or whatever. But the problem with that is that these models have a token limit, and by um, creating such a large prompt, you'll run into those token limits a lot higher. So let's see. Yeah, I kind of already covered this, but you can train with more examples than can fit in a prompt. Um, and speaking of tokens, by using fine-tuned models, you'll reduce that token count. And tokens are ultimately what dictate cost and how fast you'll get a response back from OpenAI. It is worth noting that creating a fine-tuned model does incur some cost. If you're doing a lot of training data, that cost might, be measurable. You might want to run it through a calculator at some point. But if you're doing just, 100 to 1,000 lines in the training data, it really shouldn't be a big problem. And like I said, reduce latency. This is always a good thing to get those quicker responses back from the API. That way you're not waiting for up to 15 seconds. With fine tuning, you can do a lot of things. Classification, we'll cover that here in a bit, but classification is like determining sentiment analysis, like David went over, determining if something is related to a perk, whether it's related to baseball or hockey, which we'll cover. There's a lot of stuff there, but essentially what classification is going to do is return you a single word response on what something is. You can also do conditional generation and train it on that. So things like paraphrasing, writing ads, you name it. One example I saw was write an ad with a Wikipedia article. But this list is by no means exhaustive. You can do a lot of things, and I will say with fine tuning overall, there's a lot of trial and error. I recommend starting out and just doing a little bit of training data, and then see how that goes, and then tweak and go from there. Like I say here, you can always go back and add more training data to a model. Another thing worth mentioning is you might be thinking, well, I have all these completions that I have in mind, but I have no clue how to structure these prompts. You can actually fine tune without a prompt. I have a link here to a blog post that kind of shows how to do so. But I will say, because it doesn't have that prompt, your mileage may vary and you might need more training data. So the real question is, how much training data is needed? I found this handy chart from some OpenAI docs, basically showing accuracy and how it improves depending on the amount of training data. If we were to use something in production, I'd probably try to get to that 500 level. But of course, start with, 5,200 to see how it even works to begin with as a proof of concept. And it is worth pointing out that even just with 100 lines of training data, DaVinci 2, this chart's a little bit old, so DaVinci 3 is not it. But you can see DaVinci is already up to close to 90% off of so little data. But models such as Ada are a lot cheaper and a lot faster. So sometimes it is better to use different models for this. All right. So getting into some of the practical examples, I have, let's see here, created a couple of, pardon me while I pull up this tab. Created a couple forms here. So this first one is kind of a riff on David's segment about sentiment. I created a simple form here, and the idea is these would probably really only exist in a private area on the site, maybe not even be on a page, but most likely accessed through the admin. And I've added a paragraph field here for a prompt, and I've just lowercased it, the labels, prompt and completion, since this is what the training data expects for the CSV columns. And then I have completion here. One thing I did do, since this is recommended for classification, is just use numbers for, -1 for negative, 0 for neutral, and then 1 for positive. This just reduces those numbers of tokens, speeds things up, and makes it cheaper, like I mentioned. So I have a few entries here. I took exactly what he had and then matched it to the correct value. And then I went to import and export. I exported the entry, so I went to sentiment, and then I just selected prompt and completion here. And in my downloads, I now have CSV for that. So I'll show you what that process looks like. The first thing you're going to need to do after that is get the CLI tool set from OpenAI. Unfortunately, requires some use of some nerdy tools, but it's pretty rewarding, and it does guide you through the process. So I'll go ahead and copy this. I'll open up terminal here, change into my downloads directory. Looks like I'm already there. And I want to pull the sentiment data. So this -f is just determining what file we're going to use. So we have the CSV here, and I'll let it rip. And this is going to analyze the CSV file and give a few recommendations. So do we want to add a suffix separator? I'll cover that in a little bit. In this case, yes. Typically, you'll want to do whatever's recommended. Add a suffix, and then yes, and then yes. And what it's going to do is create a JSON-L file, which is JSON in the form of lines. And then this is the data that you can then create the model with. So you'll take that trained file, you can see it here, this JSON-L training file, pass it to the CLI, and then choose your base model here. Unfortunately, when I've created fine-tuned models, I've seen it take upwards of 30 minutes. So unfortunately, it's not something I can demo here. But once you kick off the creation, you can then follow it and wait for it to complete. And then once you do that, or once it completes, you'll actually see it in the OpenAI settings here. So we do an API request to get all of your fine-tuned models from your account or organization and output them here. The other example I had for fine-tuned training data was a writing style one. So I'll go to the form. There's no prompt for this one. I was testing some things. This can actually be deleted. Actually, no, wait, I do need to leave it here. Reason being, I need to get that CSV export with an empty value, so that's why I added it. And then the completion is, I just took some intros from Gravity Was Weeklies, just with the idea of, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could ask it to write a Gravity Was Weekly intro? And then I'll show you some of those. All the prompts are empty, and then here are the completions. And if I prepare the data for this one, since there's no prompts, I actually get quite a few less questions during the process. It's gonna ask if I want to remove greetings wizard, since it kind of recognized that, but no, because that's a staple of it. And then do I want to add a white space character? I'll go ahead and do yes, and then yes. So not very many questions with this one. The nice thing is if you structure the data improperly, it'll throw an error, or it'll just give you recommendations and try to clean it up best as it can. And it's even going to give you some estimates on how long it'll take to train that, which may or may not be accurate. All right. So I do have a model set up, a fine-tuned one that does classification. I think this is a good example because it's really cut and dry. The expected result is to determine if something is related to hockey or baseball. This is in the OpenAI cookbook on GitHub in the form of a Jupyter notebook. So Jupyter Notebook is essentially this downloadable file that you can take, put it into an editor such as VS Code, and then you can like click on these code blocks and have it execute the code. It'll show you the output, and it'll actually guide you through the process of setting up this fine-tuned model. But essentially what this is going to do is scrape some data from, I don't know if it's old Usenet forums or what, about people talking about baseball and hockey, and then create a model on it. So I'll go to the forum, and I have OpenAI fine-tuned classifications. I have an input here where I'll just, take a blurb about someone chatting about hockey or baseball. using the live merge tag like David demonstrated. And then in the OpenAI settings, we're using completions. I have this Ada personal fine-tuned model here. The prompt, I'm just going to take input. I've enabled the merge tag. The other thing that I've done, and this is pretty important, is set the max tokens to 1. If I leave this as the default, it'll use the first word and it'll be correct. So like baseball or hockey, but then it'll just start doing what's called hallucinating and just write a bunch of stuff that is borderline gibberish in some cases. So this is where tweaking these settings can come in really handy. So now if I go to the form, I can take this sample input about the Rays in Tampa. And then we can see that it's baseball, and do the same for the Detroit Red Wings. And we know that's hockey. One thing that was kind of fun is I just started entering in cities to see if people talked more about baseball or hockey. So I could do Denver, and it's hockey in this case, or Seattle. Let's see if it's hockey or baseball. Baseball. So kind of cool. It's a good example, like I said, because it's cut and dry. The API responses are super fast because we're just using that one token. One thing to note here is I did have to use a snippet because when you're using classification, there are these separators in between the prompt and the completion, and you need to end your prompt with that separator. These \n strings are essentially new lines, and if I try to enter this into the feed settings, it'll be changed and not be exactly what this is here. I did include a PDF here if you want to do classification, just with a ton of notes about how these separators work, why you need them, and so on. So definitely some recommended reading. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it in there. I have more reading at the bottom about fine-tuning some of the blog posts. I found the OpenAI community forums to be super helpful just to see what ideas people are riffing on for prompt and completion ideas. And the GPT-3 subreddit also has a lot of people talking about OpenAI fine-tuning. So do check those out. And that's all.
All right. Hey guys, I'm Cole. I am the marketing lead here at Gravity Wiz, and I'm actually joining you guys from Malta right now. So hopefully my connection doesn't drop out, but I'm sure someone will step in and let me know if it does. But feel free to let me know in the chat. So we had one question come through that was basically, more or less, as a marketing agency, what can we practically do with this plugin? So I thought maybe I'd explore that a bit, maybe talk about how I use it, just give some examples quickly. So we'll screen this. So just to contextualize it a bit, I think as someone who's super optimistic about the space, I think there still is some gaps as far as replacing a whole writing role or content role or something like that. There's still, a lot of progress to be made here. And I think right now at this point in time where you can see AI helping out, specifically in the context of Gravity Forms or really anywhere, is going to be in things like idea generation, summarization, auto-completion, research, and reporting. So basically just process efficiencies, helping get the ball rolling with ideas, summarizing existing text, just small kind of simple things to help your workflow more or less. And as I talk about all of these, they're going to apply to pretty much every marketing channel. So content, SEO, email, ad copy, etc. So just jumping into some use cases super quick. Lead generation. This is a super easy one. It's pretty basic, but the idea is, you're already using Gravity Forms on your websites. Really, this applies to any kind of form submission process, anywhere where you're collecting information on your website. You can now kind of sprinkle in AI into the mix and just get, say, more information about a specific field, if that's a person or a company. You can also use it to automate, maybe, provide personalized responses automatically. So just to show you guys what this could look like, I've mocked up a form here where David Smith is going behind my back and he is reaching out to another agency saying, we're interested in utilizing your marketing services. Our current marketing lead, Cole Fraser, keeps talking about Gravity Forms and OpenAI. I think it's getting to his head. So on the agency side, this form could look like as simple as, with this example here, you could just create a backend, you just create a feed, set it to completions. I'm using DaVinci for this. And then you can see that I've just enabled a prompt that is as simple as something that Dave's kind of already talked about setting up. But, the prompt is like, just provide more information about this specific field. So I've used company name, but this could be really anything you want to learn more information about or get AI to riff on for you. I've just put in things like target market, common pain points of target market even. And then you can see this is just output with the actual reach out message as well. So this is an example. I put it into post content, but you can obviously put this anywhere. You can send it to email. Really, I've also kind of just taken a bit of a leap here and showed you how, if you wanted to feed this information back into the model, for example, you get another automation to get it to draft something based on what its output here. There's a lot of possibilities. It's simple in concept, but I think this example kind of shows just how you can easily integrate it into your existing workflow using Gravity Forms. Jumping into idea generation, this is a place where I find it to be probably the most helpful, is just getting the ball rolling with existing ideas, or even just finishing ideas as well, kind of just helping out. So I've mocked up just like an outline generator, for example, where, you want to start maybe working on some content, you have a keyword in mind. In this example, this is a tool I've just created with Gravity Forms where it's like, I'm going to set the keyword intent, I'm going to set maybe the tone, if I want to have related products, target length, the funnel stage that I want to have included. And then in the back end, this could be as simple as just configuring a single prompt, with all these fields, and you can customize this to anything you would want. And then you can see the output on the right-hand side, just as a super simple example there. Taking this even further, we can start dealing with content in bulk, in large quantities, and being like, we have a bunch of existing content. We want to generate social media headlines, ad copy, really anything else you can think of. And we can feed that in to the AI, maybe specify, a specific platform. We could also specify the audience. There's other kind of parameters we can include here, but just for simplicity, we can take that and then, output it. In this example, I've actually written it to prompt 3 variations for each headline because, of course, it's kind of hit or miss with some of these. So it's helpful to have multiple, but you can see it's output 3 here. But again, we can take this and use it elsewhere using Gravity Forms. So post content, it could be sent directly to email. You can utilize entry blocks. Here's an example where I've used Gravity Forms Google Sheets. And there's a world of possibility there as far as dealing with your own content or even your client's content as well. So taking this concept and just kind of riffing on it, it's like we have, social media headlines, outlines, ad copy. These are all tools I built in a couple of minutes just to quickly show you, what's possible. And again, these are things you can create for yourself and use internally, just kind of make those internal processes easier, get the process going or get the ball rolling rather. And then this is also something that you can be using with your clients. Content optimization, I think this could be helpful for people because if you're an agency or if you're working in marketing and you're utilizing WordPress or Gravity Forms at any point in the submission process, this is like a very simple and easy way to kind of integrate AI and just kind of optimize your workflow or just kind of help. So, if you're using an internal submission process, I think as Dave kind of showed where you're submitting directly to post content with the example of The Hobbit, it's just an easy way to kind of deal with existing workflows and get more of your content in that process and make it easier. So using AI to basically get summarized suggestions of bulk, content analysis, SEO analysis, things like key areas for improvement on a given piece of content. And you can do it in large quantities. So this is, again, a mock-up of what that could look like. If you're working with Gravity Forms to submit content, maybe you want to use checkbox fields just to, clarify which parameters you want to have and get edits and suggestions on. So things like SEO or specific mentions, you can integrate other fields into this process based on how you're using Gravity Forms already. and then simple things like readability, wordiness. And, I've taken a bit of a leap here to show you where this could go as well, where it's like, maybe you want to specify the output. Maybe it's going to be directly into post content. Maybe you wanted to write a summary report. Maybe you wanted to rewrite it. And again, you can send this anywhere and reuse it as you need. And I think one thing I, definitely should cover is just why use Gravity Forms. I think a lot of what I've described already is something you could easily use ChatGPT for. But I'll counter that with basically, if you're here, you probably know why you'd want to use Gravity Forms with this. You're already using Gravity Forms and it's already kind of embedded in so many of your workflows that using AI in that process is going to be much easier and give you a lot more benefit than trying to, work with a third-party tool. I think where AI is going to shine is in being supplemental right now and helping with your existing workflow and anything that you're doing with Gravity Forms already, as opposed to taking it all and doing it somewhere else. Obviously, you have access to your own data, and working with your own data, you're going to be able to keep that, in-house with however you're managing that. And I think as you're creating all these simple tools and customizing them, fine-tuning them yourself, you're going to see that it becomes more beneficial to keep them and scale them really, and scale everything that you're doing using Gravity Forms. So efficiency, flexibility, accuracy, there's a lot of benefits there. One thing that I wanted to speak to more is fine-tuning, which Clay's touched on a lot, but obviously it's, I think something I'm excited about that's going to be, something that's a bit more accessible soon, but where I think a lot of these examples shine are in the context of fine-tuning. So just to give you, one example, Clay's already kind of gone over this, but something I really like seeing is this startup that just does chat with anyone from the past, where it's like they feed this model like everything about Charles Darwin or Abraham Lincoln or something, for example, and then you have the ability to communicate with this, and it's super fine-tuned to the point where you're only communicating with historical information about that. If you think about that concept and you apply that to, say, a Gravity Forms integration that's fine-tuned for a specific company, then all these tools that I've suggested, back here, all of a sudden have a specific output that's relevant to your company, so they can adopt your brand's voice, your high-performing copy, your tone, things that work for you, you can now utilize as part of all these tools for even more efficient processes. And to take that further, as an agency, you could also do this with your clients. So all of a sudden you have, internal knowledge bases and just easy ways of getting the ball rolling when you're working with any existing client or a prospect, client or their client even. So, that's everything for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Cole. That was fantastic. Last segment. We are at, we're 5 minutes over already. We have a ton of Q&A that we can go over, and we will go over. If you want to stick around, then please do. I expect, we have probably another 10, maybe 15 minutes. Again, just to reiterate, I've seen a couple people ask still if it's going to be recorded. It is being recorded, and we're going to be sharing that in our Wizarding Weekly next week. Okay, let's jump into the Q&A. So, kind of broke this into a couple categories here, and I grouped your questions as they were very similar, but just asked slightly differently. I just grouped together. So we have Dan, Edward, and Anthony all ask for real practical use cases, please. I hope that this workshop has given you something in that vein. But if there's any other questions that you have related to use cases, bring them on. We're super eager to keep exploring this with you. Speaking of use cases, the next category is possibilities. Allah asks, idea generation for unique weddings. This is absolutely possible. And that's a cool idea too, as far as like just category there. We kind of showed a couple examples where you could kind of generate content in the same way. You could say, literally, give me ideas for wedding locations and base that on user submitted details like the season they want to get married, the location they want to get married, theme, and you can let them provide whatever they want or as little as they want, and then just let AI supplement the rest. Patino, Haneen, and John asked, can we build actual chatbots with GF OpenAI? Not quite yet. I mean, you can kind of hack together a solution, but we actually are working on it. We'll be exploring this ourselves. So if you see a chatbot pop up on our site, then you'll know what it is. I just realized it might actually be nice to see my face. Marcial says, does OpenAI work in languages other than English? So the short answer is yes, but it is optimized for English. I looked up OpenAI's official response on this, and essentially is what I just said. Like, you could use it in other languages, but it's going to work best in English. But worth mentioning, and another cool option here is that OpenAI can handle translations, and it's fairly competitive with Google Translate as far as the research I've done. Google Translate absolutely edges it out, especially when you get into like colloquialisms. It does a better job of, kind of interpreting the actual meaning of the phrase, and giving them a better equivalent in the other language. But for a lot of uses, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty powerful. I included a link there too, so you can see an actual example of that if you're interested. Alan, Freddie, Danny all asked about image generation. Yeah, we're working on it. Our original plan was to make it available, make the core functionality available in this free version. But you would still rely on Media Library, which is a perk in the Gravity Perk suite. So rather than doing that, we just think it's going to make sense just to kind of bake support for it in the core, but make it part of our pro version, which is coming soon. No definite ETA on that. We still have some features that we want to add to our free version before we do that. Speaking of which, we actually, and it's in the comment thread if you were following along, but we are adding support for the new chat endpoint, which lets you essentially communicate with ChatGPT, which again is based on the OpenAI API. More on that later. Steve and Stepan asked, can I generate website copy for my clients? Yeah, absolutely. Cole mentioned this. I think I kind of talked about it a little bit with the Hobbit summary, book review summary. But I did provide a link back to Cole's thing there. Just the TLDR of how to do this. Create a form with the fields for whatever data that you want to collect from your clients. Then you create an OpenAI feed that takes that input and adds a prompt, and then OpenAI will generate the desired copy. What you do with that copy, again, is up to you as far as if you want to capture it in a field and you just want to send it in an email, put it in a confirmation. Very open-ended there. That's going to end up boiling down to how you want to use it. Or you can make it like a form that you never submit. Like you just type in and then it, again, uses live merge text to just generate the content right there. Creating more of like a chat GPT experience there. And then last, I just mentioned that you can adjust the prompt to tweak the results as needed. Again, there's like this blossoming career coming right now called prompt engineers, where you just learn how to get what you want from the AI by engineering your prompt in just the right way. And a lot of that is still just trial and error. You just keep trying until you kind of are getting consistent results with what you want to see. Not to confuse with fine tuning, because that's actually when you're fine tuning the data. But speaking of fine tuning, Nate, Jacob, Akila, Logan, and George Ali asked, how do I train or fine tune the AI? Again, revisit Clay's epic presentation on this. Link to it right here. I understand it's probably pretty intimidating, especially if you're not a developer. I did want to mention also to Akila and Robert, who asked, do we have any plans for making fine-tuning easier and or better? Yes, we do. Some of those steps that Clay demonstrated that are manual right now, we do want to make automated. So you could essentially just click a button and it will create a model or send it to a selected model, and it will train it on your data without you having to do all of those very granular steps. Obviously a pro feature, but we think it's going to be so worth it. And Whirling, again, anytime that I'm excited about using a feature for Gravity Wiz, like that's just like a very good sign that there's going to be a lot of value for our customers as well. Concerns, because we're not afraid to talk about it. Blake, IP or citation issues with using generated text. I did a bunch of research on this But the short answer is that the jury is just still out. It's a kind of like a new territory, you know. One of the examples I thought was really interesting was that there was a guy that gave a monkey his camera, and the monkey took a picture with his camera. So who owns the copyright for that? The monkey or the guy that owned the camera? And the courts just basically said no one owns a copyright on that picture, because you didn't take the picture. You kind of like created the scenario in which that could occur, but you did not create it. It was not your creativity that created that picture. So in the same sense, that's kind of where like it seems like the law around generated text is heading. It is not human generated, so therefore it is not human creativity that is creating it. So it's something that is feasibly not copyrightable. Again, I'd highly recommend the Forbes article as a primer on that subject. But yeah, there's going to be a lot more that's coming up in the years. For now, again, this is not legal advice, but I think that we're all safe. And let's just keep paying attention and seeing how that develops. Andy, what happens if OpenAI's API goes down? Great question. Currently, it just fails silently. Nothing will happen. We could probably look at improving that. The only issue that we've had is like we can't get the API to go down. It's up 99.14% of the time. Also worth noting that I know a lot of people have tried to use ChatGPT, and they have a lot more downtime, or essentially just throttle their usage because they're at peak capacity. But that is not a reflection of the capacity of the OpenAI API. That is specific to ChatGPT and that tool. So again, OpenAI's API is still operating at 99.14% uptime. So really great. Jose asked, any GDPR concerns with OpenAI? Again, these are questions that I got to make clear. We're not giving legal advice here. And don't construe it as legal advice, as they say. But my understanding of GDPR is essentially it's all about personal data and consent. So if you're not sending any personal data to OpenAI, I told you guys I was going to do that, you're good. But if you are going to send personal data, then I would absolutely get the user's consent before you doing that, just to stay compliant. Otherwise you're in the clear. Logan, how can we better handle wait times for large responses? So yeah, this is something that, if you are getting it to generate like a full article, I know someone had asked in chat about, okay, great. So you can generate an outline. Now I want to take that outline and then get OpenAI to generate a full article on that. So that's going to take a little bit of time, I don't know, probably around 20 to 30 seconds, depending on the model that you use. In that scenario, you probably don't want your user just sitting there, twiddling their thumbs. One thing that you could do that ChatGPT does, you can't do this now, but one thing that we are going to be adding support for is streaming the response back. And so that way the user would see that something's happening. They will see that text being added into the input or into an HTML field. And so they'll know that, okay, like work is happening, and they could even start to consume it ahead of time. While the rest of the response loads. Okay, awesome. That is it. I did it in 10 minutes. Perfect. There are some unanswered questions here. If anyone, I would strongly encourage everyone to read through these questions. If you're curious about these and you do want answers, then I'll be happy to follow up on these in our next workshop. Other than that, just want to say thank you so much for coming. These workshops are a blast. We do them. We're almost at once a month now. It's more like once every 6 weeks. So please sign up for our newsletter so we can let you know when the next one is going to happen. All right, y'all. Again, thanks for coming. It's been a pleasure. Bye.